ECEGSA. So on behalf of the ECEGSA, I thank you all for attending our event. I also thank our local panelists, our esteemed faculty members for devoting some of their precious time to help the graduate students. And I also want to especially thank the external alumni, our distinguished alumni, for also joining us through Zoom. So with that, maybe I'll give the floor to Priyanka, who has worked tirelessly to organize this event.
Thank you, Rafat. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming to this session. My name is Priyanka Kaswa, and I'm the organizer for this panel event. Before we begin the session, I would like to announce that this event is recorded, and I would also request all of you to try to maintain as much silence as possible, so that we don't have any other issues with the meeting out. I have the great pleasure of announcing our moderator for this event, Professor Amre, who is also the faculty advisor for ECEGSA. And we have an amazing panel here to discuss on two main topics: is academia for me and how do I land an academic position. And so this entire event is divided into two sub-sessions, and between the two sessions we plan to have a 5-minute break where you can collect your survey needs. At the end of each session we are going to have some time where students can ask questions. And so thank you again for joining us today, and now I would like to hand you over to Professor Andre.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you, Priyanka. Before I start, we guys try to stay very quiet all the time, except when we ask questions. Of course, then only the speaker speaks. The reason is this meeting hour that is supposed to focus on the one person who is talking. The camera and the microphone in this meeting hour. So please stay quiet unless you are the one who is speaking. Thank you. So I'm pleased to be moderating this panel this year. This is the 14th annual ECEGSA academic panel in Broaden. And we have two outstanding off-campus guests this time. So the off-campus guests are former students from here who are currently faculty elsewhere. And I'm very pleased to introduce Yannick Demetsis on the left, and Namrata Aswani on the right. And apart from that, we have a panel of 5 people plus the moderator. Dr. Jaja will be joining us a little later. He is being held up with some other commitment. But we have Dr. Bart, who is in communication area. I suppose more people know him. Dr. S.P. Wilson, who is in signal processing. We have Dr. Kevin Daniels, who is a microelectronics guy. And we have Cheng Gong, who is an electrophysicist. So we have a few range of areas. And Yanis Degassis is in the computer engineering area, and Namrata Baswani signal processing. So as a start, I want to ask the two remote guests to say just a few words about where they are coming from, when they're graduating, and what they have done since, and who their advisor was. So please, Namrata first, please.
Sure. Can everyone hear me clearly?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm Namrata Vaswani. I graduated in 2004 from Maryland. I spent a year as a postdoc at Georgia Tech, and since then I've been a professor at Iowa State University. I work in signal processing, machine learning, and related areas. Really, I do what I do. It's now called machine learning. In particular, I've done a lot of work on sparse and low-rank matrix recovery problems and dynamic settings. So when data appears in a time-varying streaming setting. So yeah, that's about me, unless you want me to read out my bio.
Thank you, Namrata.
Okay.
Yanis? Yanis?
Yes, I'm from the West Coast. I'm Yannis Demetsis. I'm an assistant professor at the moment in the Computer Science and Engineering Department of UC Santa Cruz. From July 2020, I took 1 year leave of absence from Santa Cruz in order to complete a short postdoc for 1 year at the UC Berkeley, and now I'm back to UC Santa Cruz. I have recently started my teaching duties. This semester I'm teaching my first graduate level class on advanced crypto and security. As you know, I received my PhD from the EC department of UMD. I was advised by Professor Harala Spagamathu, who recently moved to Yale. And my research focuses on applied cryptography, security and privacy, and general secure databases and systems. In particular, my research mission is like to try to bridge the gap between cryptography and security with like real-world systems and databases by working and publishing papers in both areas, aiming to build cryptographic solutions and real systems that are simultaneously practical, efficient, and probably secure. Thank you.
Thank you, Janis. Okay, so the first half of this meeting, the main focus is academia for me, so to help you deciding whether you're interested at all in joining academia. And the second half is how to align academic positions. Suppose I am definitely interested, what should I do? And you should start doing certain things about it. So the first half now is academia for me. So how about first talking about academic life? What is academic life like? Expectations, responsibilities for academic people and life in general. Who wants to start? Kevin, start.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Professor Kevin Daniels. As Andre said, I'm in the microelectronics area. My specialty is 2D material synthesis. So we really focus on not just growing material, but applications as far as sensing and optical properties. And so one of the things we developed was a COVID sensor that we can detect a single copy of the virus in less than a second. And so we're doing a lot of development there commercially. So I start with that simply because it's been a busy 18 months. So it's my group has grown twice as big since the start of the pandemic. And so it's been just a lot of work in general of managing everyone, pushing a lot of projects forward. And so just day to day, like going in, really, with classes is one thing, but then also, balancing home and life as well. I have 2 young children, 2 and 4. And so, yeah, it can be a balancing act for sure, of balancing the 2.
Is it worth it?
It's absolutely worth it. I wouldn't trade this job for anything in the world. Just having the flexibility of having an idea and seeing it to fruition is nothing like it.
Liz?
So I've been a professor for a very long time now, and I really enjoy it. As Kevin said, even at this point, I much prefer academia over thinking about industry. Almost all of my PhD students have gone into industry. They're doing very well in industry, but I like being able to do what I want to do and do the kind of research that I like doing. I like working with graduate students. And you get to choose the students that you work with. You form great relationships with them. And it is a balancing act. I have 3 children. They're all grown now, and especially when they're young, is quite a balancing act. But you have a lot of flexibility in your job. You can do your job at all kinds of hours to make life work for you. Of course, there are times when you have to be at a meeting or you have to be teach a class, but other than that, you're very flexible in how you integrate your home life and your work life. And I found that that helped me a lot in being a mom of, a parent of young children. Being able to, if I needed to, go to an event at their school in the middle of the day, as long as I didn't have conflict. You don't get to do that, have that kind of flexibility with a lot of different types of jobs. And I can, grade things or work on paper at halftime at a soccer game. So you figure out how to make your life work. So that flexibility is key for me. But again, just really what I love is being able to work on the problems that I find really interested, that I'm passionate about. And working with other colleagues that I really have formed relationships with, and, you know, publishing with them and writing grants with them and the whole thing. I mean, you get to have more say, more control over your life because you're choosing the problems you work on, you're choosing the people you work with. So it's more control, I think, than what you would get in industry.
Thank you, Carol. Sasha, with this experience?
I guess I share this feeling. It is the same for me, that I like choosing my own problems and basically not feeling a need to work on what other people think important if I don't. And I guess schedule, yes, over the years, also you can teach yourself to adjust your schedule. That is not so difficult. Actually, I found this to be an easy job. So if you're looking for an easy career, I advise you to be
Thank you. Tango, right?
Okay. I joined here 2 years ago. Like many other already shared, you can also sense actually in academia there is a lot of freedom, especially in you have freedom to choose those topics you are really interested in, as long as you think it's doable. This is something quite dramatically different from the job in most of the jobs in industry, not necessarily law. I think this is one thing that attracted many people. The other thing I personally enjoy a lot is because we already spent tens of years in campus, university, college, you know, high school, whatever. You can always meet and know a bunch of excellent people and energetic people. I think this is also one point someone raised 2 years ago in this panel. In university, you can always know a lot of, not only one or two, but sometimes even hundreds of different people who are energetic and also very brilliant. Sometimes in some job, in some office, you maybe tens of years, you just interact with a few people. So this is a very active, vibrant, fluid environment. So that brings you a lot of joy. I think that those are two main characteristics. Yeah, very impressive.
Thank you, Chen. Namrata?
I couldn't agree more. Like, I guess the flexibility, it's extremely flexible. I have one child, she's 9, and, you know, for everything. It's extremely flexible job. In our case, my husband and I are both doing the same job, so we both have a lot of flexibility, which makes things easier. Besides that, there is also, I think, there is no other job that pays you to learn, so it's amazing how much you can literally work on whatever you want, whenever you want. And I've transitioned a lot from what I was doing in my PhD, for instance. Right now, most people can't guess who my advisor was at Maryland. So I started in computer vision with Ramachalappa, and now I do very different things. I mean, what I learned there has helped me, but I've taught myself a lot of new topics, sometimes by teaching the course. So, yeah, I think it's an excellent job to have. It's very well paid in the US. Doesn't compare with the Googles and the Facebooks, of course, but that's my guess is that's a 5 to 10 year trend, and you'll see where that goes eventually. So, yeah.
Yanis? Are you learning from the course you're teaching now?
I'm thinking now. So from my side, like I'm new to this area, so I would say like the only experience that I have, like I can compare myself with like my fiance, who is like a researcher in a company. So we both started at the same time. So I can see that this is like true, the freedom that I can pick like the research topics that I would like to work on. So I cannot agree more than that, but this is very important, and like I have a totally freedom like to pick and work like on the problems that like I really want to. And at the same time, I agree that like the other thing that I can say like comparing like these two cases is that flexibility. So I can work like, let's say, late at night, not have to, I can schedule my meetings in the most convenient time for me, etc. So there is like, so this is like the second thing, like this. So an academic job comes like more flexibility. But of course, like, it also comes with a drawback, like the salaries are incomparable.
Thank you. Yeah, looks like so far there are only positive sides. Probably later on we'll talk a little bit about possible negative sides. But two people who are in academia tend to like it, and certainly on that side as well, I like very much what I'm doing, and I like the freedom to do it whatever I want, wherever I want. Right? You can, for instance, I have a lot of family over in Belgium, and I spend a number of weeks every year over there. Well, I can doesn't matter anything I do here, I can do it from there. Except teaching, even teaching, you're directly remotely recently. So that's a big advantage. Something that people have not mentioned much so far is about teaching. And teaching and mentoring. Is that a major component or something? Have you decided, or can you mostly focus on your research and teaching is not that important for you, or is it always important? And you could also distinguish before tenure. We have two untenured people here, we can focus on that, and after tenure, and how different it is. Who wants to start? Carol.
Yeah, I'll talk. I don't think that I'm teaching differently after tenure than I did before tenure. I really enjoy the classroom, and I really enjoy interacting with the students, and I try to make it very interesting, and as much as I can, I try to bring my research into the classroom so that I can give them some application. And even, I started a company, and sometimes there are some practical things that you just don't think about when you're a student, and I try to bring those in to make it interesting as well for the students. So, but, I guess I will say that being a professor is juggling a lot of things at the same time, because you have your research, which means papers and grant writing proposals, going to conferences, and you're teaching, and then there's overhead that comes with that. You have a TA, but also the grading is very important. You want it to be consistent. So, I do much of that. And then there's the service. You're serving on committees, and that takes time. So, there's a lot going on. And one thing I really had to get used to as a professor was there's always going to be stuff that you need to do. It's never like at the end of the day you feel like, okay, there's nothing and I can go and take a week for a vacation or something like that. And there's just always something to do. There's always a proposal to write, there's a paper to read, there's a review you need to do of a paper or whatever. So there's always stuff, but you have to learn how to be able to live with knowing that there's always going to be stuff. It's not like you're totally down. You just have to take the time for yourself. Because you always got stuff to do. So you have to learn how to give time to yourself and to your family.
That is very true. It follows you on the weekend, it follows you at night.
Yeah.
But there's a flip side to extreme flexibility, of course.
Yeah.
One thing I should add, which is also that teaching actually kind of keeps you grounded. With research, you're sometimes working on a problem for months and months and nothing comes out, or you're not in the mood for it, or your students are not. Everyone went through stuff in the last 1 year. I think teaching keeps you grounded. You feel like you did something useful in the day. And hopefully, students learn something. It comes with its struggles too. I think it takes those of us who did not go to school in this country, it takes a while to understand how to teach so you can actually effectively teach your students. And then what else? There was one more thing. I think that's something that took me a while when I was a tenure track. And then the fact that you should teach to the middle, along with of course having challenging problems to keep everyone, challenged, but it takes a while. That's not the culture I grew up in India. So yeah, so that's kind of my view to teaching. It takes a while to understand how to teach, so you can at least effectively teach more than half the class, especially in undergraduate courses.
Thank you. So these were all three tenured people exposed. Now we have also three untenured people. We have not said anything yet. Can you hear me, Ganesh? You seem to not hear me very well.
Can't hear you very well.
You cannot hear me very well. I don't know what I can do about that. Sorry. So Yanis or Chang or Kevin, you talk about before tenure, how important is teaching, how much effort you put into teaching, and balance it with other responsibilities.
Absolutely. When I first joined here at Maryland in 2017, I was absolutely terrified of teaching. I am naturally an introverted person, and so the thought of getting in front of a bunch of students was like absolutely terrifying to me. Like before I joined here, I thought that I would be at a national lab doing research, and that would be my thing. And so that was my comfort zone. And so I definitely stepped out of my comfort zone with teaching. It definitely is one of my favorite parts now, is mentoring the future generation of researchers and engineers. And so when I first started, I definitely put a lot of effort into teaching to make sure that I was giving the students what they needed to find jobs, right? And so I focused a lot of my classes on speaking the language of the field. Microelectronics is nothing but just term after term after term. And so I really wanted to put forward, students getting accustomed to being able to speak that language. I would say now I put a lot more effort into, not that I wasn't doing it before, but research, just because I've gotten to the point now that I'm comfortable enough with teaching to be able to effectively convey what I need to convey when I go into the class. And so I definitely think it's definitely, I wouldn't say a learning curve, but just getting accustomed to being able to, a few times a week, being able to go in front of students and give them the information that they need. But yeah, and like everyone was saying, it's a balancing act. It's like juggling with way too many, balls in the air. And so, there's a lot of burning the midnight oil. I'm naturally a night person anyway, because the kids are asleep, the house is quiet, it's just me. And so I'm able to get a lot of work done there. But yeah, it's, like I said, I thoroughly enjoy teaching, and I thought I wouldn't, especially coming from the National Lab. So yeah.
You want to add something, Kevin, or?
Yeah. To me, I think
You guys don't have to talk on every topic, right? You can pass.
to me, I feel like the teaching is, for me, is a very pleasant learning process, because it's different from the other things. Anytime when I want to really convey some knowledge clearly out, I have to guarantee I really understand it. Otherwise, when I speak, I feel something quite risky, because they will ask some question I don't know. It's fine you don't know, but I mean, when I prepare, I want to really let them know. I find I need to force myself to really understand it very clearly, and even know the audience. For example, some concepts are really quite fundamental, but some students, they have much engineer background, then how to resonate with them. So this is a little bit tough, but through some effort, I think as I'm still learning, I can get a progress. The other thing I enjoy very much is you see your information is received, and some concepts, some working principles of those devices are understood because of your teaching, and this can be reflected by their eyes, and also by their homework. And a little small thing is I personally also enjoy reading their homework, because many of my homework is just elaborate your understanding of one knowledge or one concept or one device working principle. And I find some answers are really
Well, of course, your graduate students will be a lot about research, and so that's a way of recruiting, teaching, the specialty that you're in is great, because then you can recruit a lot of students to your research program. But even as undergrads, you talk about the sorts of things you do, there will be students who will reach out to you, and they want to learn more about what that is you do, and you end up having undergraduate students who work with you that actually contribute a lot to the group. Some of them are really, really smart, and it's great for them because they get to be around graduate students and learn what it is about, what it's like to be a graduate student. It's great to see them go on, and graduate and go to graduate school, in the areas that you taught them. That's quite rewarding.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Carol.
Yeah.
I've mentored over 15 undergraduate students. I've only been here 4 years. I've mentored over 15 undergraduate students. 2 of them are currently graduate students in my lab. I think everyone else are in graduate programs across the country. And yeah, it's just super rewarding and all of them came to me by taking a class of mine and just saying like, hey, I want to do research in your area, because I bring the research into the classroom.
And they often will write you notes and thank you for certain things. And sometimes they don't appreciate you until a year or 2 later, but a lot of them will appreciate you right away. And it's great to see that you're having impact that way.
And if I can add one more thing about teaching is, even now I commit this mistake. Do not ever assume you're going too slow. You always need to be, your students are learning this for the first time, and this happens when you're new especially. You think you know the material so well that you think you're boring this class. Maybe 1 out of 50 or 1 out of 10 in a graduate class is thinking you're going too slow, but for most people, you're always too fast.
Yeah.
At least that's what I realized with my teaching. I have to and that's why Zoom teaching was really hard, because I didn't see people's faces and I don't know what I did.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be back in the classroom.
one small point, just one very quick. I heard several faculty shared about this. I call this is some courses we teach a few times, multiple times. So I find that every time you teach, it's not something old. Actually, I always refresh my understanding. Some new understanding always are there. So this is very good.
Okay, so when we
So can I ask one question? So this was like a very interesting discussion. Thank you so much. It was very helpful for me. But I would like to ask one more thing about new faculty members or upcoming ones. So what is the expected ratio between teaching, research, and service? Let's say from the first year, from the second year, and how this is going to change after the year? What's your experience?
yes, that's definitely interesting question.
You want the theory or the practice? I guess theoretically my thing is 40-40-20, so 40 teaching, 40. And I think before tenure it was maybe 40-50-10 or something. But really I think teaching it's very variable depending on the semester, how much time it takes and what you're teaching. Like this time I'm teaching a new graduate course on high dimensional probability, so I'm spending a lot of time on it because I want to learn it myself by teaching it. But in terms of what is valued, there is just one question that's valued as far as teaching goes. Doesn't matter, when committees evaluate you, there is that whatever question 30 or question whatever on your evaluation sheet. That's all that most. Because in some sense, that's the only thing they can measure.
So one very important issue, if you are wondering whether academia is for you, is because you have heard mostly or only positives about academia. So an interesting question is academia versus industry. Are there any advantages to industry or academia is definitely better? Maybe you will go for the industry because you
Make a lot more.
Anybody who wants to say something about that? Academia, has any one of you been in industry before joining academia? I guess not, right? Yeah, Sasha has been with the labs. You want to say something, Sasha?
Yes, even though that is not your typical experience in industry, or it was not those days, but still I would say that industry is focused on short term and is absolutely uninterested in any fundamental problems. So if you care about those, don't go there.
But was Philips always like that? Because I thought they were more.
I came late into the game, so they kept slanting in that direction as I was there. Previously, yes, but it rested on AT&T's monopoly in long-distance calling, so that was an utterly different environment that cannot be replicated anymore. So yes, it is. If you think that you are more toward fundamental problems, long-term research, and 60% you fail, and maybe 40, if you're lucky, you succeed, or maybe even 10% you succeed, then you cannot do this in industry. And in industry, it's all project-oriented, and you work on a tight schedule, and you do what your manager tells you to do. And they still call this research. If you ask me,
I want to welcome Brother Jaja, department chair.
Thank you. Not really.
So currently we are talking about university versus industry. So far, only heard positive for university, for academia. But are they positive for industry, or can you say something about the comparison there?
Well, clearly depends on the interest. So I don't quite agree with what Sasha just said, because there's industry different than what he was there.
Brother Joseph mentioned that there are two remote participants here.
I know that.
And they are hearing us through this robot. This now is called living out. And it's important.
Yeah, you should let me know if you can't hear me. I just came from giving a lecture, so I'm a little bit bored, so I hope you all can hear me, but speak up if you don't hear me. So I think in terms of industry, not that I want to advocate for industry, but these days, high-tech jobs in industry, depending on where you go, could be very attractive in the following sense. The resources available to you for doing your applied research, maybe not fundamental research, are incredible. Here, if you go to academia, you have, for example, machine learning and AI, which is the area I'm working on right now. I need to set up my own GPU cluster. It has to be very expensive. I need to bring all the benchmark data that my students want to use. And if there is a bug in the code in any of the software that I'm using, my poor students have to figure it out. In academia, all these resources are available for you. And in general, from what I know, at least in Google, Microsoft, I don't know, Facebook is a mixed bag, because I have 2 students and I have 1 more who's running away from Facebook. It's a little bit a mixed bag, but still the amount of resources, both in terms of compute resources, data, benchmarks, and programming expertise available to you is incredible. I mean, we just cannot compete in academia with industry regarding these issues. It's still, at the end of the day in industry, you have to justify your research. And this differs significantly from one company to another. I know people who are working on Google research in Seattle, for example. My nephew is working there. He absolutely loves it. I mean, he He does very mathematical work, publishes, and he works on privacy, security, machine learning, that kind of work. And he absolutely loves that. Still, he really at some point, I'm sure, when I try to go to academia. So there are some, I mean, in addition to the salaries, which are significantly better in this, there are some advantages, at least for research in certain areas. But, I mean, I don't know what the discussion has been. I wake up every day and say I've been so fortunate to have an academic job. Maybe it wasn't as competitive when I started, it definitely wasn't. But the flexibility, and more importantly, the fact that you meet all these young minds, both at the undergraduate and graduate level. I mean, this is such a wonderful asset that we have. And you have the opportunity to educate, train, and contribute to science and engineering at the same time. Very challenging, but I wake up every morning and say how fortunate I have been to have had an academic position. I should stop here. I don't want to.
Thank you very much. How about getting some questions from the audience? You guys can contribute something, ask questions, which was covered here, or ask.
This is your opportunity to ask questions, because usually you take these exams, we ask you questions. And this is so unbalanced and so unfair. Now is your opportunity to ask questions, to ask tough questions in terms of academic careers. The academic careers are also challenging in so many different ways.
Questions?
Anyway, questions?
Questions? Yes.
I know that there are some professors who don't get along, say, with other ones, whether professionally or personally or for whatever reasons. So is this type of politics, I suppose, significant in your careers, or has it been at any point?
If you're asking me, I would say overall, our department, unfortunately, doesn't have too much politics. I mean, you may have detected something. But if you're talking about in terms of general, I mean, it's very competitive. So in this sense that, and it's also sometimes research, the way you evaluate research, I mean, you have to be evaluated by your peers in other universities. So if they are working in the same area, there is some competition. So this may color their evaluation a little bit, but at the end of the day, like any big group, there are some politics involved. I think in our profession is relatively minimal given the size of our community. I mean, so IEEE has, 500,000 members. So for our community or any specific sub-community, there is usually some competition. There are some always interesting personalities, but I don't think this is a determining factor. If you do good work, one way or another, it will shine.
There's definitely competition, and I would call that, in fact, emulation. In fact, once you have tenure, that is what drives you to produce field, because people you meet at conferences have some nice results, and you have to produce nice results. Also before tenure as well. But before tenure, you also struggle, or at least you work towards getting tenure. But after that, what drives you? Is there anything that drives you once you get tenure? Well, emulation is do you keep proving yourself and being able to talk to your colleagues at conferences on the same level, not having that the big guy who's done lots of things and you're just doing that, right? And so to me it's a very important component of faculty life. You don't have that much in industry. Because you don't compare two industries, you don't have a meeting between two groups of different industries, and this is better. You don't really compete on the market.
In others, right? Competition in industry.
Competition in industry. In industry, there is no competition. You work for a manager, and your manager talks to the next manager. That's what John was saying, resources. I don't know what resources, but my student 10 years back worked for Amazon for 1 year for their biggest machine learning whatever department. Very good money. But he was completely, utterly disappointed. Said that they don't care a tiny bit for any long-term projects. It's all on the schedule. Do this, do that. And yes, they publish, but what they publish does not compare with the scope, the time frame that you can set for yourself in academia. He's now a tenured professor in the University of San Diego, UCSD. So he had opportunities to choose, and he chose.
I just wanted to go back to his question and just say that sometimes, people are people, whether you're in academia, whether you're in industry, and sometimes there can be uncomfortable situations, and I say, I wish I had done more of this, but you want to have mentors and people that you can go and talk to that can help you navigate different situations. So I would say when you go into an department to look at who people are and identify those people that you resonate with, that you think are really good, that will advise you, and seek out relationships like that. And you actually want multiple mentors, not just one mentor, because some people can mentor you in one area, somebody else. I don't think you can have too many different people that you take advice from. Now, of course, you're going to filter it for your situation and based on how you feel about things, but it's good to hear other perspectives and get other ideas from people.
Okay, I'll if I can say, I think there is a lot of politics. And the student that asked the question, when I was a student, that was my impression. There is a lot of politics at Maryland ECE. Hopefully things have changed now. It's awesome that they have. And there is politics in my department here too. But I feel like politics affects you less if you're in academia. Yes, you cannot piss off too many people if you're pre-tenure and you can get into trouble, but there is redundancy. Even if you do piss off one or two, there are others who will value your work, your teaching, your research, and make sure, you're tenured, you're promoted and everything. So, yeah, you need to be careful within reason. You cannot fight with everyone in the department, but I think there is more opportunity to not get along with a few people and still do well.
Another question? Yes.
So,
What's your name, by the way?
I'm Sadik.
Okay.
So, speaking of tenure, and this is probably more directed towards the younger people on the panel, it's a hard and, from what I've heard, it's a hard and relatively uncertain procedure. Right? So, how do you deal with it? And I guess that also, to a person from outside, it also kind of skews the balance between academia and industry. Right? Or how did you think about this question when you were here?
Any of the untenured people say something?
Can you recap the question?
So the question is about the struggle or the difficulties that you encounter when you don't have tenure. It's very important for you to get tenure, and you have to work a lot harder. But can you elaborate on that phase of your life? Is it worth it?
Yeah,
The struggle?
basically that's the question.
I would say having great mentors really helps out a lot. People who have already gone through the process. I have fantastic official and unofficial mentors, like over 10 people, who I can go to whenever I have questions or I have some doubt about something, or it's like, hey, am I making good progress here? When I first joined here, I met with, the then department chair, and he laid out for me. It's like, okay, this is what you need to do to get tenure, right? Or at least a framework of what I need to do to get tenure. And after that, it's focusing on teaching well and focusing on research, and most importantly, getting grant funding. So I spent a lot of time talking with program managers and bouncing ideas back and forth, working with industry even, for maybe taking some ideas, a step further from the lab. And so, yes, I wouldn't lie and say it wasn't stressful, for sure. I still go back and say it's a very rewarding job. But I like to think that in terms of, all the different components and stuff, the only thing you can really do is just do your best.
Yeah, I think that's really your interest, like you mentioned. If you really don't like this process to define as suffering, of course, going to industry will not have such a so-called tenure process. But I think in our past experience, when you do anything, even when you learn a new skills, you also need to pay a lot of effort. You can call it suffering, but actually in the process, you don't feel it's so much suffering because you learn, you enjoy the growth, you enjoy finding something you don't know. So in the tenure process, we consider many factors. Of course, we care about the result, but the process is not a so-called completely suffering. And actually, you will do research, you will teach, you will interact with colleagues. Like even, for example, we have such kind of activities. For example, I don't feel this activity is suffering for me. So in the process, you have many components, but actually, if you simply look at the tenure, you will define the whole process as suffering. But actually, when you are really going through the process, actually, it's not suffering. And you have a lot of things to learn to enjoy. Yeah.
Why don't we take a short break? No more than 5 minutes, preferably, because we have still lots of things to talk about. And there is some food somewhere in the back here. And so you can take your food back to your seat. More than 5 minutes to eat.
We need to go to my cave
So everyone, please sign up in the sign up sheet. Take a drink, take a coffee. So there are vegetarian like this, walking with my life. To keep them both positive, I am asking myself what I will
One thing to add, right?
How do I pause it? I can't take it.
Before is that you will broaden your area of research. You will work on something that you have not worked while doing your PhD, and then you will have two areas of expertise to claim on your applications, and that's a big benefit. And at the same time, I would walk back the statement about the large number of publications required for faculty applications. Areas differ. There are areas which are more experimental, many co-authors, and maybe there things are different. But in my area, which is broadly defined as applied mathematics, when I look at an application and I see 15 published papers, I just know this is not possible, and then questions begin to come up. So I would say again, in my area and areas related to it, if not topic-wise, but by the nature of its work, I think fewer publications are not necessarily an impediment. As long as the quality is assured, I think you will be all right.
Sasha and Andre, if I can interject, I would totally agree with what you're saying. But then people like you, unfortunately, are in the minority in every department. What I have seen happen is, even in very theoretical areas, these days publication counts have hit the roof. Right or wrong, doesn't matter whether your paper is correct or wrong, numbers do matter if you want to get hired.
Look, this is a good
Overall, I'm talking about statistically, not how I would evaluate a resume. I agree. If I see 15 publications, I take that to be the Again, in my own department also, I'm a minority, so.
If this is a good university, then the applications will be evaluated by top experts. Top experts will see through the papers, and so they will evaluate them very quickly. And even a large number will not sway the committee toward that application if the other smaller number of publications has better results to support them.
Yeah, hopefully.
And if people cannot evaluate, maybe you don't want to apply to that university.
A lot of places do resort to counting papers in good venues, but bad papers do appear in good venues too. Good journals, good conferences do occasionally have not so good papers. So yeah, I think numbers to an extent do matter, regardless of what we would like to think. I mean, yeah, my ideal would be what Andre said of how anyone should be hired or promoted or tenured, but that's unfortunately not reality today. Oh.
I would like to also add one more thing here. Okay, I do believe like numbers are matter a lot, but like at the same time, you don't have like to collaborate and like be like a part like another like a part like a co-author of a paper, but like you don't have like enough contributions. Try to make like your own like to lead like papers, like to be the first author and try to advertise that. Like for example, in my case, like my competitors, they had like more papers than me, but like in the job market last year, I was like one of the ones that like I had only first. I was the leader of all the papers. Like I had like my publication rate. So, and I advertised that. So, I didn't say like I'm the first author because my last name starts with a D, and like it's like early in the alphabet. But I said that like this is like I'm the leading author, and like you can like the recommendation letters were like to support that, etc. So, I believe that like also ownership matters.
With a pinch of salt, yes. Yeah.
Sorry.
With a pinch of salt, totally, yeah. Ownership matters, quality matters, yeah.
Yeah,
So you have like 20 publications like even like in top tier conference, like if you are not the first author, then again what is like your contribution in the area, right? So try to lead, like try to spend time like to make your own work.
I was just going to add another point. We were talking about, you know, getting your name out there. And we talked about conferences, you know, presenting your work at conferences, bringing senior people, having your thesis advisor or others invite senior people. But I would also say you want to go to other universities and present your work, especially in front of people that we know are going to make a difference, or could make a significant difference and be an evaluator for you. And this is particularly true when you're going up for tenure. I think you should actually identify those people and make sure you get in front of them and give a talk. So they're very familiar with your work already before they necessarily even read the paper. But you presenting it makes them want to go and read the paper and understand more about what you're doing. So hopefully they already know from conferences, but you just want to cover all sides of that to make sure that the right people are aware of what you're doing. And it's okay to send them, when you have a conference paper, email it to them and just say you wanted to share this, you thought they might be interested. You know, so there are a lot of things that you can do to make sure that people are aware of what you're doing.
And if your advisor is involved in conference organizing, it might be good to ask, like, hey, can I get involved in some way as well? Because, you know, if people see your name coming up, you know, as far as, you know, even, you know, maybe running a session or even running a technical behind the session and stuff, you know, it's good for people in the community to constantly see your name at these events.
And to be active in your society. whatever the professional society you belong to. And a lot of them have graduate gatherings for graduates, and they may even have a committee for graduate students that you all get together and you attend those conferences. It's good to get to know them because these are your peers, and you can even network among them. But then, of course, you get to know the senior people too once you're active in a society. You just naturally get to know them and they get to know you.
Another thing that helps is writing solid reviews. At some point we will be contacted by people, it will start probably by people from this department who are editors of some journal. They will ask me to review a paper. But then after, especially after you meet people in conferences, you get review editors from elsewhere. It's very important to do reviews in a timely fashion and high quality. You should put a lot of effort into understanding the paper correctly, identify possible flaws, and do a very good job with it. That's one way that people will get to know. Also, I wanted to say, in terms of writing, of putting together a strong application, what one say? The important component of the application is list of people who can write letters to. You will be asked to submit a list of possible people who can support your application. When I am on a search committee, by the way, we get lots of applications for a given position, we need 100 applications. And so the first pass, we want to eliminate many of them without looking at all the details. What do I look at? I look at the school they are coming from, the university where they were living. I look at the name of the advisor. Then I look at the names of the people listed as references. If you have good people from other universities in your list, that means, okay, I'm going to have a closer. Just for the name, without giving the letters. Just for the name. Possibly, we may not have the letters yet. We didn't ask for the letters. But based on the name, I keep your application on the side. So, and again, for that, networking, right? You need to have some people, some good people who know you. Otherwise, you cannot write such a list. And names from other universities, of course, can not pervade other faculty. And you can start with other faculty in your university. By the way, when the proposal exam was instituted about 20 years ago now, one key reason for doing that is because on that exam you had 3 people, and one initially the third person was in fact not in your area, but so you have of course research advisor, but you have 2 other people on the proposal exam. After your exam, part of the reason why we decided that we have 2 other people that live in your research before your defense. Before them, it's only at your defense that you have 5 faculty members who look at it, okay. And a few students did help talk with people on the faculty. Of course, you can do networking inside the department first, right? And then outside the department in the university.
You were talking about thesis proposals and why we're doing thesis proposals. And then?
Talking about the proposal. Okay, so after hopefully you pass the proposal exam, you should keep in touch with those 2 other faculty members. Okay? And you have to make the effort, they will not make the effort. Okay? You should ask them to meet every couple of months, right? I mean, don't ask to schedule business with right, but every couple of months you sent them an email, could I possibly meet with you? I was interested in the question you asked me at the exam, and I tried to do something in that direction. I'd like to discuss that with you. That's a way that you make connections inside the department.
What are we discussing now? So, you said applying for... Yeah, but what is the next topic? Because we don't have much time. We have 15 minutes.
Well, the next topic, what is it? Yes.
What is
Sorry,
the
I
next-
didn't hear what you said.
What is the next topic?
Ah, yeah.
Because we only have
Okay.
15 minutes.
Okay.
The number of schools.
So what school should you apply? Application material, application process. First, a postdoc. Should we do a postdoc first? That is a good topic.
We already spoke of that.
Briefly, only you have to do it.
No, also Jonathan Hill was mentioned, right?
Okay. Anybody wants to say something about postdoc?
For me, absolutely, do a postdoc. Yeah. I mean, definitely if you feel like you have the record, apply directly out of grad school for a position. But a postdoc will help you formulate ideas that you didn't think, you wouldn't have thought of just being under your advisor. A good postdoc gives you the freedom to explore your own ideas. And have a sounding board with a good postdoctoral advisor about what is a good idea and what maybe needs a little bit of work.
And it will give you 2 or 3 more people who can write good letters. So, how about questions from the audience? Yes.
I have a kind of question about the postdoc. So,
You have been a postdoc already?
no, I am a PhD student, fourth-year PhD student. So, it's like in faculty position, most of there are different field of study. Some field of study need extensive postdoc experience to get the papers. And some of them are kind of computer science who don't need to have postdoc, they can apply and get a faculty position in that thing. So my question is like, for the minority group, right, say for example optics, photonics or microelectronics, we need the postdoc and to get a handful amount of publications so that we can apply for a faculty position in the well-known university. How many years of postdoc experience should we look for?
Okay, so the question is, in some area, and I agree with that, there are some sub-areas where postdoc is pretty much a must. You cannot get a faculty position without a postdoc. In fact, there's growing kind of across areas. In controls, it used to be nobody would do a postdoc. Nowadays, people do postdoc control as well. But in particular, in electronics and electrophysics, you need to have a number of years as a postdoc in order to be qualified for a faculty position. Can you comment on that? How many?
Just a quick comment. Your statement about computer science is not quite correct. Last year we were fortunate to hire 2 outstanding on track. They were fresh PhDs. They both graduated this June, this past June. But they wanted to spend time, one in an industry, and for a very good reason. It's a top-notch research group in AR. The second at postdoc at Berkeley and MIT to gain experience before really joining the department. This is now becoming fairly common. Even in most of people in computer science will delay, even though they accept the offer, they'll delay joining the university for a year or 2 to spending essentially like a postdoc to gain more experience. So I think overall, one way or another, postdoc is becoming a kind of essential to build enough momentum into your research program so that when you join the academic department, you're up to speed and you can hit the ground running.
But my question is like how many years of experience the postdoc is kind of you see
Well,
as
you have examples. I mean, I think Kevin spent 2 years, 3, and you spent 5. And they are both are outstanding.
So this is electronics electrophysics, right? And I've been in control, it used to be no postdoc, now 1 year, 2 years.
1 to 2 years.
Yeah.
1 to 2
Familiar
years.
with 1 to 2 years.
So it depends. It depends.
C0 is,
Because if you're doing experimental work and you go to a different place, you may have to set up your own experimental infrastructure. This may take 6 months to a year. So 1 year is not enough. You have to be able to produce results before you start looking for an academic job. So it depends. But I strongly recommend it. I also strongly recommend that summer internships in either government labs or industrial research labs. This will give you exposure to different perspectives, broaden your research interest, and be a resource for additional external references for you. So I strongly would recommend postdoc one way or another, summer internship, but only in good places. You don't want summer internship to do very applied work, tedious work, because you want to augment your publication record and your research experience.
some other questions, anything more for you? Some other questions from other people?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So let's say, I know I'm graduating in let's say I'm in the fall semester has started, but I will graduate in spring. When should I start having this preparation material? Should I start a year earlier of my expected graduation? When should I start creating the teaching statement, the research statement, those kind of
So the faculty application
yes.
or the postdoc?
Faculty positions. How long ago before my graduation should I start preparing?
Okay, so how early should people who intend to apply for a faculty position, how early should they start thinking about their research statement, for instance, a teaching statement, and some other things, in order to have a good package for the application? That's a question.
First, don't underestimate the amount of time it takes to write this research statement and teaching statement. I mean, this is very different than writing a paper. In your research statement, you're saying, this is my research objective in the next 5 years. You have to be able to justify why they are important, what potential impact this research may have, and then describe at a high level the technical approach that you're going to pursue to achieve these goals. This is not easy, because you're saying that in 5 years, when I have for 10 years, this is what I want to accomplish. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make, don't underestimate the amount of effort and time it takes to write the research statement and the teaching statement. Oh, I love to teach. I want to teach courses in this way. That's not enough. It's much more complicated than this. So usually, if you're looking for a position, let's say fall 2022, next fall, you should be submitting your application in, let's say, November or December. Most deadlines are, and they'll accept applications beyond December 15, but for best constellation, December 15 or December 1 is the deadline. And so walk backward for 3 to 4 months for you to prepare the process.
And I would say if you could add where you think you may get funding for that kind of research and why you think you would be able to get funding there. Like maybe they have a really strong program in that area, but you know, there should be some reason why you think you would be able to get funding from NSF, whatever particular division at NSF, say, or at NIH or wherever you're thinking about going for funding.
And I would also add, get as many people to look at it as possible. You should have your mentor group and even colleagues, you know, and fellow students take a look at it, and they will be able to pick through, you know, problematic areas. And this goes the same for even, you know, your job talk. I gave my job talk at so many places before presenting it, you know, when I was on the tour of faculty, you know, interviewing for faculty positions. And so, you know, definitely use your network to make it as polished as possible, both your packet and your job talk.
And before you go interview, you want to know what's already offered at that university, and if you can say what you might bring to the program. So maybe you're going to develop a course, you know, so that you'll be able to get good graduate students in the areas you want to do research. And you can let them know what your plans are, you know.
And once you have your schedule of who you're going to meet with, research those people, right? Every place I interviewed, I had a tiny little notebook in my front pocket that had everybody I would want to meet with, what their research interests were, where I would see my research interests would fit in with what they're working on. And so it's helpful in you know, the interview process.
If somebody in your area read some papers, at least some parts of some papers, and so you can directly relate to them concerning their research, particular research. People always like it when others know about their research and interested in their research, and you want to please interview. Any other thoughts on this or other related matters? On the application process?
So I have a quick question.
Yes.
So when you are a postdoc in your field and you are applying for a faculty position and you are getting rejected from some university, do you think that you should have gone to industry than faculty?
Oh, I applied everywhere. I applied for other postdocs, I applied for industry, I applied for academic positions. Don't limit yourself just to, because again, it's, you know, it's, you're going to put your best foot forward, but anything can happen.
Yeah, because sometimes it's not about you, it's what the department is looking for. And they may be looking to fill particular slots, and you may not fit in those slots. So it's good to really read well what people are advertising in, and what they're trying, you know, pay attention to that, because that's what they are aiming to do, is fill those positions.
Also, something that helps in the application being considered carefully is if somebody, your advisor, for instance, likely we know, if you are going to school, likely we know people, we know faculty members. A quick phone call and just mentioning your name and a few words, that will put your application on the small file side. And the file goes for further examination. So phone calls, the advisor can help you further, help you decide where to apply also. Also for postdoc positions, that's even more important. Because the postdoc position that decided by one person usually, that's only the professor who is serving this position. And if somebody who really knows well which is here and who that person respects says something very strong about you, very, very top of the party. Any other contributions?
I guess I'll end with a few thoughts that I had, which I should mention. I would say, again, yes, numbers, it's become a numbers game, so don't feel bad if you don't get hired the first time you apply. But I would say, if I had to give advice to that's the advice I give to my grad students and to anyone else. Whatever you do, how much ever you write, be sure it's correct. If it's theoretical work, be sure your proof is truly correct, not correct with high probability. If it's computational experiments, be sure it's reproducible. Anything that you're writing, your proof should be reproducible, your experiment should be reproducible. If you're doing physical experiments, those should be, correct, basically. Collect enough data. Don't make inferences based on 5 data points because it's a cool area to publish in. It's unfortunately not. That's one thing. And the second thing I would say is take care of your health, mental, physical, emotional. It's a stressful process. Not getting a job, it hurts your ego. Not, when you're up for tenure, again. And I would, take care of both your physical health, mental health is about as important as how well you do. So I think that's it for me.
Any last words from you in all this?
Yes, so I would like to suggest you can actually focus on things that you can control. You can control your publication record, you can control your exposure. I like to present as we discussed that to conferences, to workshops, to study groups, do collaborations. These are your collaborators probably they will give you your recommendation letters. Try to explore your connections, try to make connections, explore your advisors' connections, your collaborators' connections, your UMD, try to conduct also, try to explore also UMD's connections. For example, try to conduct UMD alumni. So if you would like to apply to Santa Cruz, the CSE department, please contact me, send me an email. Also, for an advice for young PhD students, try to be passionate. This is the time to explore and study and to be curious about different groundbreaking fields in the area. So, and throughout this process, you are going to learn a lot. This will help you to create the job opportunities for your future. Also, the most important thing I think that I can think about is try to discover your true passion. Try to find this area, this research area, this problem that makes you want to put that extra effort that will make you the best at it. This is very important, right? To find that area that you will sleep on, you will sleep and think about it, then you're going you will wake up and think about it, etc. This is very, very important because finding that salad will be the key to achieving both your personal goals and happiness. That's the last words from me.
Okay, thank you very much. And so time is up. I want to thank everybody, starting with our guest of honor, Namrata Vaswani and Yoni Tenure.
Can I quickly add that Iowa State is hiring, so look at Iowa State ECE, we're hiring in various areas, so contact me if you are interested.
Thank you. Thank the local family as well. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you for joining us.